Hi, I'm Leslie Clayton, and I am the founder of the Joyous Heart Network. I launched this network for raising funds and information for survivors of sexual abuse and for their families who may need support and don't know where to go to get it. 2 years ago, with the help of my dearest friends, my teachers, and the educators that have helped me on my healing path, we together created this network. And today I'm here with Linda Starwolf from the Transformation House and Shamanic Breathwork, and she's an author of many things. One of the reasons that I've invited Starwolf to be with us today for this conversation is that we're looking at what do survivors need to know and their families need to know about the steps to healing, and what are the safe ways to find a healer that's right for you. I'm also really wanting to point out some of the ways that childhood sexual abuse can manifest in adulthood. And sometimes we don't even, as survivors, know that some of the challenges and the blocks we're having in relationships and in our maybe addictions are showing up because of those things that happened when we were kids. And Starwolf has over 35 years of working with people. She started her career as a mental health and addictions counselor in the 80s. She's also a nationally certified alcohol and drug counselor, and she draws from her own personal recovery experiences with addiction. And there's so many things I could say about Starwolf, that in the ways that she and her late husband Brad had assisted me with breath work and sort of like a rebirthing experience that happened many years ago. I don't even remember how many years, but it's a touchstone for me. I'm so thrilled to have you with me, Starwolf. Is there anything you'd like to also add about something that's coming up, maybe even about what we were talking about how healing is a spiral path? It's a spiral to get to that new place.
First off, Leslie, I want to thank you for bringing this beautiful piece of work to the public. It's so needed, and it is so timely with everything that's happening in the world right now, with all the Me Too on Facebook, with everything that's coming out. And it's not news. I mean, it's news, but it's not news. I mean, for years and years and years and years, the mental health, the addictions fields, People magazine, everybody has been saying, how many people have sexual abuse, and the statistics have been as high as with women, like, 1 in every 10, then it was up to 3 in every 10, then it was 7 in every 10. And then for men, it was, lesser, it was like 2 in every 10, but as more men came forward, it's about equal numbers. And I just want to say, one of the reasons I think that that's the case, if I could just to begin with that, around the discrepancy around women first being more and then men coming on and now it's about equal, they're saying, is because I think it was this prejudice or this kind of feelings of like that men did not want to be seen as sexually abused. Nobody wants to be, but men, it was even more of an ego thing to know that they were sexually abused.
Mm-hmm.
The truth of the matter is that if someone is a predator or someone is a sexual abuser, and it's especially if it's a child, they don't really care if it's male or female, so whoever is in charge of children or with children that does that, it generally doesn't matter whether it's male or female. So we're seeing more and more of this coming forward. And now, particularly at this time, with everything that's happening, from the White House to the neighbors next door, whoever it might be, there's so much coming out of the closet around sexual abuse for children, for adults, for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
This is extremely timely for you to be bringing this forward as an offering. So I want to acknowledge and honor that.
Thank you.
I'm right on board with it with you.
Thank you.
As far as the spiral path goes, I'll just say that it's the foundation of my organization, which is Venus Rising Association for Transformation and Venus Rising University. And the programs that we offer are based on a cyclical way of healing. My cat just came up. I didn't know she was in here. So she'll be in the interview with us.
Wonderful.
This is Princess Lakshmi. Thank you very much.
Can't see her face.
Well, she might pop up here in a moment. You might see her. Right now, she popped on the couch with me. But anyway, the spiral path is a model that's really important in the healing paradigm right now, whether it's mental health or whether it's the shamanic world. It is very, very important to replace the old linear model of linear healing. Nothing in the entire, not only the earth, the whole universe that we know, the solar system, nothing travels in a straight line.
Right.
Everything is orbiting in not even circular, but in spiraling paths, all the way from the water that goes down the drain of your toilet when you flush it to the cosmos itself is spiraling around in this huge spiraling energy. It is a imprint within our psyche that change and transformation happens in spiraling energies. So the template of the spiral, and I just want to say this piece, is really important because it takes away the shame of healing and transformation when you don't have it all done forever because of therapy, things, and to understand that anything that we have that is a wound, or anytime we're making a transformation, that things will come up for us again, but it's at a different octave, and it's not the same octave as the very first time you took a look at it. So the spiral path is a beautiful, non-shaming, kind to our psyche and our lives path for transformation and healing.
Thank you. So I'd like to kind of, I'm getting this image while you're talking of the harmonics, you know, the sacred geometry and the harmonics in music and this spiral path. You can see images that we've seen in artwork, and then one of the things that we want to kind of point out today is how does that graphic of that spiral path show up? Say, could you tell a story about someone who maybe their first awakening step to choose, just the choice to actually take the courage to heal? Like is there like a story you could tell that maybe goes in a spiral that shows us how the spiral path may show up in a survivor's story? Is that
Absolutely, Leslie. You know, I've had the opportunity because I started out in my 20s working in the mental health system and then working in treatment centers in my late 20s and 30s. And then before I stepped out into more the shamanic world in my late 30s. But I had, you know, a good almost 20 years prior to that of working in those systems. So almost everyone I met, if they stayed in therapy or counseling or told the truth, admitted to some point of having some sort of sexual mishap of some kind. Sometimes it was later on as a teenager. Sometimes it was as an adult. It could be rape, you know, as an adult. But most folks had something from their childhood, certainly from their adolescence, and later on, perhaps something in their adult years. So just in thinking about different cases of people that I worked with, specifically, looking at that is that maybe the first time someone began to feel that there was something even going on because it was repressed, and because at the time that something happened, maybe they were very young, or, you know, like even pre-verbal, that, you know, or maybe they were still young, but they were so young that it was something that they were threatened and they pushed it away, they were dissociative, and they promptly forgot about it. So perhaps now for the first time as an adult, they're really in love and they've gotten married.
Yeah.
Okay? And they're really in love and they're, you know, really want to make love with their partner, you know, and that sort of thing. And all of a sudden they feel themselves panicky, they feel themselves sweating, they feel themselves recoiling. The partner's confused, they're confused, that, you know, they don't know why. So they come to therapy saying, why is this happening? Thinking this is a current day issue.
Right.
It's up in a current day process, right? And then, you know, unfortunately, many times in the traditional, and I'm not against traditional therapy at all, but in more traditional settings like I used to be in, instead of digging deeper, they would be giving a prescription drug
Right.
to relax.
Yes.
Anxiety disorder,
Mm-hmm.
okay, or depression, or something to increase the libido,
Mm-hmm.
or something, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be a medical problem. It could be.
Yeah.
It can be ruled out. There might need to be supplements. There might need to be, whatever. But so often, what I would do would be talking to people, and I would use kind of, even in the days when I worked in the mental health center, I'd use kind of non-traditional methods of meditation or guided imagery. And after a session or two or three, then people would start to they did start to have panic. They did start having anxiety because it was coming up, and all the places in their psyche that had been protecting them was struggling between holding it down and releasing it and allowing it to come forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't lead people, because therapists can lead people, but I didn't lead people like suggesting this might happen or that, but just saying, what are the images? What are the feelings? Those sort of things.
Yeah.
So maybe a person might really come forward at some point and start having what's called flashbacks.
Right.
And as the flashbacks would come, they would have a level of cognitive understanding. Sometimes people would never get the story of what happened, but they knew something had happened. Sometimes they knew who it was, sometimes they didn't. But one of the things that we came up with about 25 or 30 years ago is that the body never lies.
Yeah.
The body doesn't lie. You may not know the facts. You may not ever know the story.
Mm-hmm.
You may have done such a good job, to be honest, of protecting yourself.
Yes.
That's a good thing.
Yes.
Especially you might have done such a good job and really a shamanic skill of disassociation, of shape-shifting out, not to be present for that trauma until you could handle it at a later date in a safe environment, that you might not ever fully know. So let's just say that person knew something happened. They were able to resolve it enough to go back into their relationship, and it seemed like it went away pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And that happened. I've watched that happen. And that person goes on and continues their life. They're doing pretty well. And then 4 years later, they have a child.
Mm.
The child comes in, and the child is a few months old, and the partner is saying, well, let's go out now and have dinner and leave the child with, one of our parents or with a child care person or whatever. And the person is just panicked and cannot do that, or goes out and is miserable the whole time out. And once again, back to therapy, what's going on, this and that, and this sort of thing. And again, a new set of memories comes up.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe what comes up is the person remembers that it was the babysitter. Now they have a face. Now they remember specifically, and they came in and they said, but I did the healing around this.
Right.
And I said, you did a layer. Well, I failed then. No. To get too much too soon could cause a psychotic break. Your psyche's doing a really good job of protecting you until it's time. So maybe they do another level of work, and they're able to, do a good and thorough investigation of the people who are keeping their child, and now they're able to relax, and, and then, we go on a little bit later in life. And then this person develops some sort of chronic physical illness.
Yeah.
Right? There's this constant irritation, let's say, with the bladder infection repeatedly, and the doctors are giving medicine and that sort of thing, and then there seems, in the doctors examining, that something else comes up, and this person just begins to feel frozen a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Come back for therapy again or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another level, and there's really remembering that there was a lot of irritation, there was a lot of pain, there was, now we're getting down to this even deeper into the physical level of what happened, because it's coming closer into the body.
Mm-hmm.
The body memories that are really strong.
Yeah.
So it's not this linear of a path, but you asked for an example, and I'm giving you an example of how you cannot feel, you can, but it's pointless to feel that you're failing when you don't do all your healing, quote, at once, because there are layers, and we have a protective defense mechanisms that are healthy.
Yeah.
And until we're in the right settings where we know that we're safe.
Yeah.
I will say one other little thing about this. Sometimes someone comes in and it is their first encounter of their sexual abuse that they begin to remember. But when they come into Transformation House, because you can stay for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or 4 weeks, kind of like a treatment program.
Mhm.
Sometimes they'll have a much more holistic remembering of everything.
Yeah.
They're in a setting. They're not
Right.
going home. They're not dealing with the child at home. They're not dealing with the mate at home. They're not dealing with work. They're taking a time out to do a bigger collective piece of work. And
Mhm.
their energy field knows it and will reveal more to them.
That's
So,
amazing. Yeah. How the brain and body, the connection and the higher self, the part of us that knows we're safe. There's
yes.
that safety piece is such an interesting and elusive for survivors piece. And
Yes.
I wonder, for myself, um, in my innocence as a child, I felt safe. I have a loving family. I mean, there was a lot I didn't know and the difference between safe and unsafe. And I've only in the last few years started to recognize how elusive my boundaries are for other people because I may seem so comfortable, and that's how as an adult I would get myself into situations that after the fact it would kind of re-traumatize me. Unbeknownst to myself, I was re-traumatizing myself through the choices I was making because I wasn't aware of what safe. I didn't even know what safety was. And I find that so curious. And I wonder if you find that true with a lot of the people that you've worked with.
That's a really good point, Leslie, and it's so true. And the first thing I want to say is that, and I'm going to come back to what you said, but it's important for me to say this because I never ever want a survivor of sexual abuse of any age or trauma to ever feel like that it's their fault that they were sexually abused or traumatized. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be even really blatant about it. If a woman is walking down the street naked, she is still not asking for it.
Yeah.
Okay? If a man is walking down the street naked, he is still not asking for it. So it never excuses a perpetrator, regardless of what else is happening. In other words, what I'm saying about that, whether it's a child, whether it's a teenager, whether it's someone that's drunk, whether it's somebody that's really acting very loosely because they're maybe got high or something or those kind of things, unless the person is actually asking for it and saying whatever, they're not asking to be perpetrated. That's
Yeah.
really important to say.
Yeah.
The reason I'm saying this is a precursor to what I'm going to say next is that you find that people who were abused continue to get abused.
Yes.
And the common denominator, if the faces change of the perpetrators, is the person who's abused.
Yes.
So you can say, well, that person's just loose. That person, is a sex addict. That person, wanted whatever, and that's, I would say, mostly not true.
Right.
It's exactly what you spoke into. Shamanically, energetically, when a person's energetic field, their auric field,
Mm-hmm.
has been violated, because we only let people get so close to us unless they're our actual lover,
Mm-hmm.
So that's you're violated before there's any kind of penetration. When a person comes into your energetic chakra field. So when that happens, when a person comes into that field and they get too close, it begins to break down. There begins to be if you put your hand in water, you move the waves. Well, you begin to move the waves of protection around that person's field. There is a protective shield, if you will. And if you've not had certain types of abuse, that tends to be pretty intact. And there's not any kind of loss of a child that'll be saying, because children are really good at saying, no,
Yeah.
I don't want that. You can't make me, those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
Unless at some point there's some violation, then their no is taken away from them. There's a despondency, or maybe they were drugged. That happens sometimes with medications, all kinds of things, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Or
Or even as a child or a teenager, and being given drugs or alcohol, date rape, those kinds of things. that field, when you come into that field and it's violated, there is, in the shamanic world, we call it soul loss. You can't really lose your soul, but there's aspects of yourself, like your ability to say no and really mean it, and people take you seriously.
Mm-hmm.
You have a no. Your ability to get angry,
Yeah.
you know, to fight back, you know, especially if you were subdued or, you know, that sort of thing, or drugged. Your ability to know what's okay touch and what's not.
Yeah.
Just discernment, judgment, the guilt and shame of, I must have caused it. I must be asking for this, so I have to let it in. Yeah, all kinds of things that happen early on that give messages that break these boundaries and that prevent the safety that can actually attract perpetrator types.
Right. It's quite elusive. Yeah.
You know, it's like the rabbits running around outside skittish and running and running and running. And the hawk says, that looks tasty. You know, it's not looking at the muskrat because the muskrat's buried down in the ground and saying, there's a hawk up there. That's not safe, you know. So that running around actually draws that predator energy towards you. But it's really important, and I'll say it again, that a person doesn't blame themselves. But if they find themselves, like you said, saying yes, or find themselves in uncomfortable situations or even violating situations where they're violated and saying, wow, what happened? Why did that happen? Then you can pretty much be sure that somewhere someone took their no, their anger, their discernment, their judgment, their needs for safety away, their right for safety away.
Thank you. Wow, I can relate to all of those different aspects of the journey for sure, and remember the times where I had those kind of awarenesses. You know, it's like, oh yeah, I do have a no. One of my favorite awarenesses was at a workshop. It wasn't your workshop. It was a different workshop, and I was bringing the issue of feeling like I'm being bullied. Here I am, 50 years old, and I have bullies at home. I have a bully at work, and I feel like, and I have the freeze response when I'm feeling afraid. I don't fight. I don't run. I just like freeze. And so I was asking that question, like, what is that? Why? And he said, Leslie, I don't know. I really don't know. You think I know, right? And I said, yeah, I think you know. I want you to tell me my answer. And he said, I don't know for you, but here, let me ask you this question, Leslie. He sat back, crossed his arms, crossed his legs, and said, may I abuse you? I was 50 years old. And I said, well, yeah. And the whole room started laughing. And I said, what? He said, may I abuse you? And I said, yeah, if it'll help me understand what this is. So I was so willing. I mean, that was the light bulb. I didn't even get what was funny about it until I sat back and listened and watched the response and went, oh. And then when I got home, I recognized that I had a choice.
Right.
To say no, thank you.
Right.
And it took someone asking me that question point blank.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, there's kind of an innocence there, a naivete, you know, that who's answering that question is much younger than you.
Yeah, right.
You know, and much more vulnerable than the you that's here, you know. So it's important for people when they're working with people who survived, or even if you don't know, but you know the symptoms are there, to really begin to help that person to do that, to do an investigation, to look and say, we're not blaming you for anything that's happened in this way. We want to know, where are you having trouble in your life? You know, where's your no? Yeah. Because if you don't have a no, everything is a yes. If you don't have a no, everything is a yes. And those individuals who need for you to say yes will find you. And, you know, whatever kind of abuse it is, like you know, like you said, a boss that's you know, may not be sexually abusing you, but that maybe overworks you, you know?
It just feels like, it's fascinating. But I did claim my no. And I've had to do it a couple times in my life, but you're right. I mean, that was the medicine.
Yes.
Mhm.
And then once you start saying no, it feels really good.
Yeah. It gets easier to start recognizing that boundary, that new, it's like exercise. It's like exercising a muscle and
There,
yeah, it's fun.
there was a book years ago. It's been a long time ago by a wonderful Native American woman. Um, and I'm dropping her name right this minute. It'll come back to me. But it was called White Buffalo Woman.
Yeah.
And in that book, like I said, I'm dropping her name right now. It'll come back. But the book was White Buffalo Woman, if I want to look that up. White Buffalo Woman Comes Singing. And in it, she said that if it's not a Yahoo yes, it's a no. And I was pretty codependent back then. That was about 30 years ago. And I had a lot of codependency issues, even as a counselor. Counselors are some of the worst sometimes with codependency. And I had to get in my own codependency recovery and look at all the places I was saying yes and being too much of a giver and too much of a martyr and those kinds of things. And when I read it, she said, if it's not a Yahoo yes, it's a no. Because I thought I said no pretty well and had good boundaries. And I thought of all the places that it was not a Yahoo yes that I was saying, yes to.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, I started waiting for a moment when somebody would ask me, even something like, do you want to go to the movie, or would you like to take a walk? And asking myself, is this a Yahoo yes?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it was a really great practice. And she said, if it's not a Yahoo yes, and you don't have the nerve yet to say no, because you just don't have it yet, and it's just too threatening, then you can say, not right now.
Yeah.
Or let me think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'll get back with you. But you do not have to say yes. You can say, no, not right now, or let me think about it, or I'll get back with you. But if it's not a Yahoo yes, don't say it at that moment.
I'm going to practice that over the next few weeks.
Brooke Medicine Eagle. That's her name. Brooke Medicine. Yeah.
Medicine Eagle. Cool. Well, what I'd like to do is recap a little bit more about the Transformation House and the March 3rd event, which is one of the reasons we're meeting today, is we're wanting to shine a light and uplift the work that you and Ruby and the other facilitators are doing at the Transformation House. And we're doing this because not just because, but on March 3rd, we're in Atlanta doing a sacred healing process. That's a really sweet process, but we're also wanting to spotlight some of the healers that are in our neck of the woods, even though you're a little north of Atlanta, that people can go to and have a deep dive, if they're ready for this. So I know Ruby's going to talk more about this on our next meeting, but I'd love for you to share your thoughts about, like, in a person's journey, when it's time to come to Transformation House. Like, how would they know? And especially for a survivor of sexual abuse, childhood or adult, but man or woman, is there something that you could share with the listeners that maybe they'll know, oh gosh, it's time for me to go there?
Well, it's kind of hard to say this, but sometimes people have to hit bottom. It's easier to say that with addictions, and there is a correlation with addictions and abuse. And I would say, it's hard to say a statistic, but I would say you show me a person who's addicted, and I'll show you somebody who's had some sort of abuse, whether it's sexual or physical, or some sort of abuse in their life. It may not have been sexual, but it's been an abuse. And so when people start hitting bottom, when people start realizing that they're hitting bottom with not being able to get up off the couch, there's just depression, there's lethargy, there's just not the enthusiasm for life. People are so anxious, they feel like, that something bad's going to happen. They can't sleep. Their adrenaline is running. They're in a PTS kind of response. There's the freeze response, and there's the flight response, the flight, and then there's the fight. When people are, all of a sudden their emotions are all over their place, and the people around them are saying, you're a rageaholic, or you're a constant blamer, or you're a constant complainer and martyr or whatever. And they're getting this feedback from people. In other words, when the feedback loop in your life, your boss is saying, you really aren't, I'm going to have to let you go. you're sick all the time, or you're not showing up, you know, or you're really angry on the job, or it's hard for you to get along, or maybe you even work for yourself and you can't even motivate yourself. In other words, if it's showing up in your personal relationships, and it could be the fact that you don't have any personal relationships, that you're not allowing yourself to be close with anyone. You've become a reclusive, you know? So you're not just being a person who likes solitude, you're hiding. Yeah. So in your life, if your personal relationships are suffering, if your finances are suffering because you can't support yourself, and I know there's a lot of hardship financially in the world, so I'm not talking about that, but you have some skill set or you have the ability to work and you can't do it. You can't support yourself financially. So you can't take care of yourself like that in some way. Or maybe you're still keeping your financial thing going by workaholism, right? But your personal life is suffering, your health is suffering. Now you start taking, a lot of prescription drugs, or maybe you start drinking at night by yourself quite a bit, that sort of thing. Or maybe you start going out and drinking with others a lot. Maybe it's not alcohol. Maybe you're just sitting on the couch and just, munching on chips and cookies and ice cream in the evening. It makes you feel better, right? So it could be pornography. All of a sudden you're thinking, I just want to see what this is all about. Everybody's watching it. I'm just going to look at pornography. And then, 2 weeks later, you realize that you've been watching it every night. What's going on when you're doing repetitive actions that are destructive to you, that are addictive, that are self-defeating, and it's not what you really want to be doing with your life? When you're doing things against your own will to yourself, perpetrating yourself now, you don't need somebody else, perpetrating yourself or putting yourself in a position where you can be perpetrated by a spouse or a partner or a boss or whatever. In other words, your life is unmanageable. This is soul loss. When you recognize this and that you don't want to take it any further, that you're ready for healing. You are ready to do whatever it's going to take. We really, Transformation House is for people that are not being court ordered. It's not for you're coming because your spouse wants you to come. Transformation House is not where we're going to beg you to stay. Transformation House is a voluntary program where you can leave anytime you choose to. All right? But it's a program that you commit to yourself and then to the team that has been gathered, because we put together a team to work with you for your stay here from 1 week to, we've had people here 5 weeks, 5 and 6 weeks for a period of time. That team is put together specifically for you. And sometimes there might be 1 or 2 other people or 3 people coming through at the same time. And we won't have people coming that we don't think at the same time unless we think they'll be a good fit to be with each other, which could be really good to have a community, But as you come through that program, we're going to work specifically around your issues, what's going on with you. We're going to allow your inner spirit as it comes forward to guide us. And we're going to offer really what we call shamanic psycho-spiritual tools for you. And Ruby can speak more about that, but we're going to be working with you around your soul loss, around the part of you that got lost when you had these things happen to you, even if it was last week that you had a rape and you've been dissociative ever since. We're going to talk to you about and work with you about what you've lost and the changes it's created in your behavior. And if you've been this way your life long, looking deeper into where this began, but not only to get a storyline that will just keep you stuck, but to help you tell your story and free the energy up, free the shame, the guilt, the fear, all those kinds of things. But more than talk, we're going to use highly experiential methods. So our methods we're not going to be prescribing medications. If you need a medication, that's something you might need to, to speak to a psychiatrist or your medical doctor about. And sometimes people do need medical help for a period of time. Hopefully not forever. But sometimes that's true. But we're going to be working with you at getting to the core of what's going on with you and helping you to release that trauma. And just an aside, probably many of you who know anything about trauma have seen the animals. And when the animals, for instance, a gazelle that's chased by a lion, if it escapes and has been running for 15, 20 minutes to get away from the lion, is racked with trauma. And when it finds itself in a safe place, it stops and it shivers and shakes for up to an hour.
Wow.
Shivers and shakes, shivers and shakes. And sometimes glassy-eyed and can't even move.
Mhm.
And the psychologists believe that when it walks away, it no longer is traumatized.
Yeah.
So part of what we help is cathartic movements. It could be shivering and shaking and all kinds of physical stuff through our shamanic breathwork techniques and things that we use, through the release of anger work, through different particular shamanic rituals and things we do, even sweat lodges, things like that, to really bring things up and to release it at a core level.
Yes.
So I personally feel like that the work that we do can really support people who are really, really ready to change,
Yeah.
and to have the parts of themselves come back that was lost. And they'll need to have, I'm not going to say, and now you're healed, throw away the crutches. When you come home, you're going to need to continue to have ongoing support and let the new parts of you that have been lost, that have come back, just like you would nurture the seeds in a garden or a child. You're going to need to continue to do nurturing and supportive things for some time.
Yes.
But you will begin to get your life back.
So just so we're getting short on time, so we're going to wrap up this section of our interview. And what's the best email and phone number for people, or website? Can you say those things for us for the Transformation House?
Well, first of all, I'd say that if you want to read more about it and you want to, see it on written word in front of you and want to learn a little bit more about Transformation House, probably the best thing to do is go to the website, which is shamanicbreathwork.org, which is one of the main tools that we use and that I developed over 21 years ago and trademarked, and have trained thousands of people around the world to do this method for healing and transformation. And at last count that I checked in, that it's gone out to about 20-something countries in the world. So it's a worldwide healing tool and transformation, and it is our premier tool that we use. So we're known by shamanicbreathwork.org. When you get to that website, you'll see up the top, Venus Rising Association for Transformation, and you'll see tabs and you'll see Transformation House. If you go to that place, you're going to be able to read about it, read about some of the program, meet some of the staff, and there you can find the best way to reach us. If you don't want to go to the website, you can call our office, and someone will call you back and do an interview and answer your questions for you. You can call anonymously if you'd like to, and that's 828-631-2305. And last but not least, you can always email Venus Rising at shamanicbreathwork.org. And Ruby Falconer, our program director, I'm the spiritual program director, but our main, clinical kind of director, operations manager, will get back with you, or someone else from our team will get back with you to interview you and to answer your questions.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you. And I'll put that in writing also when we post this. I'll make sure those things are in writing as well. Thank you. And I would love to meet you again, Linda Starwood. Our time is just coming to an end, but there's so much more to discuss. I hope you'll join me again for another conversation in the near future.
I would love to, Leslie. And if I could put one little plug in here, this is one of the last things I want to say.
Yes.
One of the things that doesn't get talked about, and it's very important, and maybe we can say this for another discussion,
Yes.
is that for people who've had sexual trauma, one of the greatest painful things about it is that sexuality is beautiful, and that many times people love their connection to their life force energy, to their sexuality, to their ability to have pleasure in their lives, their ability to be spontaneous and joyful in life. So I do a lot of other kinds of sexual healing workshops and cultivating and helping people to raise their sexual energy, embrace it for the beauty that it is. I do things called Shakti Rising, if anybody's interested in that, which is not a treatment program of any kind, or transformation program, but it is a transformational series of workshops that I do. Right now, I'm just doing them for women, but I do have a few spots in a program that's coming up in July. And also, there's a series that's going to be coming out next, I believe it's October, from an organization called Sacred You that does webinars. And myself and 2 other women who are sexual healers are going to be focusing on offering, there's some free and there's some that people pay for, but some free classes that have to do on sexual healing and reclaiming your sexual energy.
Wonderful. Absolutely. We want to come back and talk more about that. That's important. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you.